And let's start with fatigue. I'm curious to know, like, how many people, even the old players, how many people does fatigue affect? And I'd venture to say it affects such a small proportion of people. So let's start with what it is. Fatigue is a system, very ancient system, that was originally intended to prevent macroing or deter macroing, I might say. And potentially it was also intended to like reduce people, prevent people from burning themselves out, maybe is a good way of putting it. Prevent people from playing too much. Okay, so and possibly getting ahead of everybody in that way. So the way that fatigue works is that everybody starts out with 12 hours in their fatigue bank, and you can check out how much time you have if you type /fatigue, and you shall see I probably have 12 hours. I have 11 hours and 57 minutes, and the 57 minutes is only because I just spent that 3 minutes milking cows or milking bison. Okay, so if you type /fatigue, you get how much fatigue you have left, and the maximum you can have is 12 hours. Okay, now every action you do takes time away from your fatigue bank. Okay, and it's a second for second. So if I do a 10-second action, it'll take 10 seconds off my fatigue bank. Okay, so that's sort of how it works. I realized I needed another container, so I'm gonna have to pour this on the ground. Let's drink and pour. So I can put the sheep milk in here, the bison milk in here, and now I can milk some more sheep. Okay. So when that timer gets down to 0, so if you use all your fatigue, then what happens is your stamina. Actually, you know what? I'm not actually 100% sure what happens because I've never been there before. I've never got this down to 0. But something happens to prevent you from doing anything. It might just be that you can't perform any action. So I'll try to right click and milk the sheep, and it'll say you are too fatigued or something like that. Okay, so fatigue regens almost as fast as you can use it, Gareth. Okay, that's quite impressive. That's quite impressive. Okay, so now the rate at which it regens, it will regenerate 1 hour every 3 hours that pass in real life. Okay, so every 3 hours that pass in real life, you'll get 1 hour of fatigue back. There's a little message that you get. It's in green in the event window that says something like you feel rested or something like that. Okay, so when you get that little message that says you feel rested, that means the fatigue timer just ticked and you got a 1 hour added to your fatigue. Okay, so as I go along here and milk these sheep, right, I'm going to be spending 10 seconds each milk towards this fatigue. It's going to take 10 seconds off, and at the 3 hour mark of playing, it's going to pop 1 hour back. Okay, so most normal players will just keep regenerating at a rate that they play. And the other thing to know about it is that it regenerates while you're sleeping. Okay, so while you're offline, it'll keep regenerating. So, all you need to do is turn the game off, you sleep for 9 hours, you get back on, you turn the game back on, and you will have gotten 3 hours of fatigue back. Okay, and like even like you see the time that I'm standing here, I'm walking over to this other sheep. This time that I'm doing that, my fatigue's not going down. Okay, so fatigue only goes down when you carry out an action. So as the action goes, I'm just going to lose 10 seconds there on my fatigue bar. Okay, so yes, it is very hard to get your fatigue that low. Now, the way people do it is you have to do an action where you don't have to really move around very much, like mining, for example. You can just stand in front of a vein and you mine. Okay, so let's count this out, right? So let's say you start with a full fatigue bar, right? And you mine for quite literally 3 hours straight. Like you're on it every time you finish an action, you start another one, and you do this for 3 hours straight. Okay, so now your timer is at 9 hours. And because you waited 3 hours, it ticks back. So you get an extra hour. So now you're at 10 hours. Okay, so you've gone for 3 hours. Your fatigue bar is now at 10 hours. And let's say you decide, I don't want to stop. 3 hours is like child's play. I'm going to go for another 3 hours. Okay, so you now have been mining for 6 hours. And the fatigue timer is now down to 7 hours. But because you've done it for another 3 hours, it ticks back to 8 hours. Okay, so you see how this is going? So now your fatigue bar is at 8 hours. You've just been mining for 6 hours straight. Like you haven't stopped. Okay, now you think, okay, I can go for another 3 hours. So you keep mining, and now you've been mining for 9 straight hours. Your fatigue bar was at 8, so now 3 hours less is 5 hours. But then because the 3 hours passed, you're now ticks back to 6 hours. Okay, so you've been mining for 9 hours straight, and you still have 6 hours in your sleep bar. Okay, let's say you go for another 3 hours. So 6, now it goes down to 3, but it ticks back 1 hour, so now you're at 4. So after mining for 12 straight hours, you still have 4 hours in the bank. Okay, so now you go to sleep, let's say. You're like, okay, I'm done mining today. That was a good mining session, 12 hours of mining straight. So you go to sleep. You sleep for 9 hours, okay? So in those 9 hours, you've ticked back 3 hours. So now it went from 4 hours to 7 hours. You wake up, you have 7 hours in the bank, okay? Now, here's where people are running into problems. They wake up the next day and they want to mine for another 12 hours. Okay, so they mine for 12 hours. Okay, if you did this, you're gonna hit that point where you ran out of fatigue. Okay, because you only have 7 hours in the bank, and in 12 hours you're only gonna regenerate 4 more hours of like 12 hours. There's 4 times 3 is 12, so you have 4 regen ticks. So you had 7 hours. You're going to regen 4 more, so now you have 11 hours. So if you tried to mine for 12 more hours that day, you're going to hit that point where you ran out of fatigue. Okay? Venora cannot restore fatigue. Venora has a spell called Wisdom of Venora, and the way that spell works is that it'll give you sleep bonus at the expense of fatigue. Right? So it actually lowers your fatigue, but it gives you sleep bonus. Okay, so that's how that spell works. Okay, so that goes the wrong way. Yeah. I know. I counted okay, so let's go back to the moment you woke up. Right? The moment you woke up, you had 7 hours of sleep bonus, right? Not 7 hours of sleep bonus, 7 hours of fatigue, right? And then you go to mine for 12 more hours. And you're right, during that 12 hours, you're going to get 4 more ticks, right? So from the 7 hours, you're going to get 4 more ticks. That's 11 hours of fatigue in that. But you just went for 12 hours. So all of those 11 hours are gone, and you won't get that 12th hour because you ran out of fatigue. Okay? 12 plus 4 plus 1. The point is the point is not exactly when you run out. Is that the point is that if you are doing straight 12-hour days where the entire 12 hours you're doing actions, okay, maybe you're right. Maybe I did that math wrong, and maybe on the second day it's not going to be a problem, but on the third day it's for sure going to be a problem. Like at some point you're going to run out of fatigue if that's the style of play that you're doing. Now, in general, the way that if you want to ride the max, like you want to just push as far as the fatigue limit will go without running out of fatigue, then the way you do this is you use no more than 8 hours of fatigue a day. Right? 8 hours. If you sometimes you can go over 8 hours. And sometimes you'd have to go under 8 hours. But on average, if you on average stick with 8 hours of fatigue a day, which is honestly a lot. Like, we're not talking about 8 hours of play. We're talking 8 hours where the action bar is going up. So this whole time that I'm sitting here, like you go AFK for a bathroom break, you anytime you stop, you're not wasting fatigue, right? So I'm literally talking about 8 hours of action timer a day. You will never run out of fatigue. Okay, ever. Okay, so yeah, and it's not, yeah, you can play for 12 hours just as long as only 8 of those 12 hours action timers are going. So, like, spend some of that time getting in a cart and riding around. Like, you know, some actions that don't take fatigue. For example, fighting. Fighting does not reduce fatigue at all because there's no action timers, right? Yet you can still get skill that way. Um, Okay, so 8 hours of constant action wouldn't be very productive either. You'd be at zero stamina the whole time. I know. Like, you have to wait for your stamina to come back. You know, there's all this pausing that's happening that, you know, in the people who hit the fatigue cap are the people who are literally playing 16-hour days. Like, that's really what would happen. They play for 16 hours, then they go to sleep for 8 hours, then they play for 16 more hours, and then they go to sleep for. And the other thing is that they have to be playing only on one character. Like, they're only playing one character because if you're flipping, I mean, or they're very good at multitasking because they'd have to flip and make sure they don't stop action timers. Every time an action timer is done, they have to start the next one. Um, yeah, it's to me, in my mind, I don't see how that's maintained. Do you know what I mean? Like, how long can you keep that up? Like, you're not even stopping for a day. You have to keep going every day. Because the moment you stop for a day, if you don't play for a 24-hour period, you're going to collect 8 hours of fatigue back. All these are young, so they're not giving me anything. Yeah, you also hate mining now. Okay, so let's see what you guys have. Yeah, you pull nighters. Totally. Like, oh, I see. You're saying it's not even possible. Yeah. Okay, let me go back because here, let's see what you guys have been saying. Yeah. Okay. So Grinning Hound, you have 3 hours and 52 minutes. So yeah, that's crazy that you have 3 hours and 52 minutes. I think in all the years that I played this game, I don't think I've gone lower than 10 hours. Like, I'll be honest. I do play in a very peculiar way though. I'm AFK for most of it, and I do not have the time to play Wurm every day because my days are mostly taken up by work and then family. Those are my two priorities. And Wurm is definitely not on that like, not up there. Um yeah, so like, if you're one of those meta gamers, all you need to do is maintain an 8 hour of action time. Like, use 8 hours of fatigue a day and you'll regenerate those 8 hours in the 24-hour period. Um and that's a lot of playing. And if you want to go past that, you want to play more, I recommend playing like an alt character, right? Like, if you love this game that much, I think it's worth the investment of playing a second character. Um, yeah, so Tuxie that it was like 16-hour days, super unhealthy. Yeah, like, you can do that. It's just, how long can you keep that up for? Right? Burnout is a real thing in this game. I forgot something. Yeah, burnout is a real thing. You if you're playing 16-hour days and you do that for a month straight, um, I don't think you're gonna be playing for all that much longer. And at that point, fatigue doesn't matter anymore, right? Because you're just done with the game. Yeah, and Willows, you're saying since you started in 2004, you can count on one hand the players that she's seen hit 12 hours, and she's seen a lot. So that's saying something. Yeah, it's very hard to hit. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I know that you wanted to text, like, send me a tell in the game, um, to avoid it going into the chat. But I'm not sure if you thought that one through, because in order for me to read it, I have to look at it and it goes onto the stream. So, whoops. But yeah, like I totally, yeah, I totally, yeah, yeah, you're right. I mean, yeah, you have to be a robot, right? Like you have to literally be on it like over 8 hours. You have to be over 8 hours a day of actions only, right? And it is there to prevent macroing. So what ends up happening is that somebody hits the fatigue cap, it sets an alert so that the devs can go like, hey, or the GMs can go, hey, there's some guy who hit the fatigue cap. Let's take a closer look at what that guy's doing. Right? I think that's the whole purpose of it, so that it draws attention to the people who are potentially macroing, right? And that was why it was put in place in the first place. But also, man, like I feel like it's unhealthy to keep that up. And so if you're really not macroing, like the fatigue timer is there to say go to bed, like get some sleep, man. Like put like I don't know. Take a break. Take a break.